Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Hope Ledford, and I'm here today on behalf of Chamber of Progress. We are a center-left tech industry group promoting technology's progressive future and working to ensure that all Americans benefit from technological leaps. Our corporate partners include companies like Amazon, Meta, Snap, and Apple, but our partners do not have a vote or veto over our positions. As someone born in the same year that the iPod came out, I can say that social media has drastically improved my life as a young person, part of a marginalized community, and I'm worried about the implications of age-appropriate design code as it may end up doing more harm than good by exacerbating the isolation of our most vulnerable young people. We appreciate the removal of a hard age verification requirement in this version. However, we remain concerned that the threat of enforcement may function as a de facto age verification requirement and chill expression online. S289 would require that a covered platform owes a minimum duty of care to the minor consumer users, including the prohibition of excessive or compulsive use of an online service, product, or feature, without providing clear guidance about what that entails. We agree promoting online safety for young people is important, but in practice, this requirement would make each site the arbiter of appropriate content for children of all age ranges and circumstances. Platforms would face difficult choices about what types of content to consider and would end up over-moderating in fear of litigation, degrading the online experience for all users, and restricting constitutionally protected speech. Algorithms play a key role in keeping online experiences safe, including for young people. They're essential for platforms to enforce their rules against content that promotes self-harm, eating disorders, and suicide. Without algorithms, all users are likely to be exposed to more types of these content. In addition, algorithms enable important interventions for youth who may be in trouble. Platforms use algorithms to direct users searching for information on eating disorders, illegal drugs, self-harm, and suicide to third-party content that can provide help, whether that be hotlines, support communities, or educational materials. And speaking from personal experience, these tools are lifelines. Platforms have long understood the concerns raised by many stakeholders, from parents to schools to government entities, that children require protection online. While state and federal policymakers have explored legislation to address this issue with mixed results, many platforms are already prioritizing child safety and are putting into place tools and procedures aimed at child safety on their platforms. S289 stands in direct contradiction to established legal precedent. The First Amendment restricts governmental interference with both the editorial discretion of private entities and the rights of individuals, regardless of age, to access lawful expression. This bill, through its content-based and speaker-based restriction, unequivocally infringes upon these fundamental freedoms. Moreover, similar legislative efforts aimed at restricting minors' access to protected speech have been met with significant judicial skepticism. Recent rulings from courts in Arkansas, California, Ohio, that regulatory measures affecting the core editorial and curatorial functions of social media companies are subject to rigorous constitutional scrutiny under the First Amendment, even if intended to safeguard young users. We agree with the need to build greater protections for young users, but some of this bill's requirements would undermine the protection that it tries to create and would end up harming vulnerable users. It is for these reasons that we request you oppose SB 289. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for testifying. I appreciate your thoughts. I'm just curious, does the Chamber of Progress have a model policy for this, for how to protect children online? Consumer Reports put one together for data privacy because it was so important for them to ensure the privacy of data. And I'm curious if you have a model policy.
We do not. I do not know that if we have one or not. I'm pretty certain we do not, but we do support creating on safe spaces for young people online, so long as they do not violate the First Amendment or place greater risk for vulnerable communities through these AADC requirements.
Yeah, could you just go over the specific areas of the bill you have issues with, and then also just go through the actual what you just highlighted as the areas of concern?
Yes, for sure. So although the removal of the hard age verification requirement, it was taken out in this version, platforms will still have to estimate age, and that will then result into, like I mentioned, a de facto age verification requirement, which will lead to, as previous people have said, privacy concerns. We're concerned that, for instance,
I have a question on that. So, I mean, when you started your testimony, you were pointing to how useful algorithms can be to find out people's mental states, what they're eating or not eating, who they're talking to. So couldn't you use those same algorithms to safely kind of choose spectrums of which children are most likely the ones viewing content?
For platforms that will be fearful of litigation, they will tend to over moderate and be and so that will lead them to want to cover more. So they will most likely use age verification in that sense.
So your members wouldn't include any of the major tech companies that have that people are on yeah, I guess I'd be curious to know if you're not, like you said, like you're representing big tech, right? So like they were already by default collecting all of this information in the background. It doesn't seem like they need to go out of their way to try to find more information. They literally have all of the information that anybody is saying and interacting with. But I would love to like hear more about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're concerned about that is the collection of, so like I said, they will tend to over moderate, and that includes age verification. So that would then to lead to more data. And so that would be a concern because that leaves the door open for cybersecurity concerns and malicious I guess like you could say like data breaches and that sort of thing. So
Oh, so
collecting
you're-
more data is not necessarily a
Sure.
better.
So your clients include Amazon, Facebook, Google, Uber, and others. And so they're not already using algorithms for age-based advertisements to target products and services and shows and all other types of content to kids? Are they not doing that in any way?
I can't speak on behalf of them, but what I can say is that if this were to be enforced, then the company would try to avoid any sort of litigation, and that would mean that they would use a more accurate source of, I guess you could say, age verification, and so they would use more stringent age verification design instead of just guessing based on algorithms.
So they're not able to currently target advertising based on profiling of potential age ranges that people fall into.
I'm not saying that's not
Cool,
true.
thanks.
Well, thanks for joining us. You said early within the first few sentences of your testimony that it would be difficult for these platform owners to develop strategies to protect children. Is that accurate? Did I quote you accurately or paraphrase accurately?
I don't believe so. Their platforms are already taking measures to protect children online, and so there is an acknowledgement that there is a way. However, we do not believe that this would be the most appropriate and beneficial way to do so.
What would be?
Well, for example, in 2021, Instagram announced that they would be stricter about what types of content they recommend to 13 to 18-year-olds. And I believe then they rolled out some new settings that give teens and parents more control over potentially upsetting content. And the number one reason why users and advertisers leave platforms is because they encounter unpleasant or irrelevant content. So platforms are thus incentivized to make them safer to retain users online. As far as the exact policy or solution for protecting children online, I think that it would require thoughtful privacy regulation as well as smart online education materials.
Thank you. Hope, does the Chamber of Progress have any data on the amount of the percentage of parents that voluntarily manage or moderate their children's intake of content via social media? In terms of, you're suggesting that it be a voluntary effort on the part of parents. Do you have any data that you mentioned all of these protections that parents can utilize to moderate their children's content intake? Do you have any data that demonstrates that parents are using those tools, if at all?
Yeah, I believe we do have data. I'm not sure on the top of my head, but I'd be happy to share that in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
To follow Jonathan's line of thinking, if you're suggesting that parents take a stronger role in evaluating the information that their children are getting, is that accurate? Is that an accurate paraphrase of what your companies are trying to do, or what you're?
I don't think, not directly. I think that it would require collaboration between platforms and parents and guardians by putting out tools that safeguard young people online from social media platforms. Hopefully that will make things easier for parents to in terms of enforcing those tools. So thoughtful collaboration between social media platforms, which they already are doing with parents and guardians.
Okay, well, what I infer from that is if parents need to be more involved, the inference that I get from that is that some of this information that's being peddled is dangerous. Would you agree?
Um,
And therefore, my own conclusion that I would drive to that is that there's a moral imperative on the part of the people that you represent to remove whatever may be perceived as deleterious and dangerous to children. Do you agree?
yes, but I believe that the social media platforms are already doing that and working to further those safeguards and tools, such as like removing endless scrolling, time limits. I know for certain social media platforms, you can restrict certain words, those sorts of things.
Kirk?
Hi, Hope. Thank you for talking to us. You mentioned that Instagram had instituted some improvements and changes for 13 to 18-year-olds, which is great. Glad to hear that. How does Instagram identify that age group? Do they already require that they give their date of birth, or how do they know they're 13?
I'm not certain on that, but I can definitely circle back on that.
To follow Kurt's thinking on that, and I have a very limited knowledge and with great specificity, but when you are able to identify a person's interests and they fall into the category of juvenile adult interests, you have some knowledge about how to target them. You have some, that provides you with some limited knowledge of what their preferences are. Yes?
I'm not sure. Can you repeat that?
Yes, if someone who's using one of the platforms that you represent is able to recognize what young people and older people are interested in, you have a framework around which to direct advertising and interest in. So therefore, I think it's reasonable to conclude that you have some idea of the age range of the information that people are seeking.
Yeah, yes, age. So in that case, I think you're referring to age estimation, which
Yes,
is
that's
good enough to
Kurt
help
started out on. Yes.
Yes. Which you've referred to, but that's different from age verification. It's not as precise enough to avoid litigation that companies will then seek to avoid, and then that will lead to the overmoderation of content online. So the difference between age estimation and age verification is how stringent it is based on determining the age. And so if companies fear litigation, then they will overmoderate and have to utilize age verification methods to avoid any litigation or complication.
Thanks, Hope. So, I mean, this bill, if you could point to exactly where it asks for age verification versus age estimation, that would be helpful, because as far as we have been working on the bill, it is based on estimation, which you're saying is easy and able for a company to do. So, I mean, that's great. I think this should work for you.
Again, to that point, so companies will seek to avoid litigation at all costs. And so in that sense, they will go above and use excessive means, which means that they would then turn to age verification. So yes, we appreciate the removal of the age verification requirement in this bill, but we do believe that the enforcement of that's in the bill would then result in de facto age verification.
So in a multi-billion-dollar industry, you're saying that companies would rather not take would not rely as much as they can on age estimation, and would just flat out remove the services of which they are making billions of dollars of profit per year by just trying to not deal with that area of which they're skeptical?
I believe that they would just would prefer not to they would
That's
just prefer
clear.
not
Yeah,
to
get that.
They want to make spaces spaces online more safe for young people. So they would then lead them to overmoderate. For example, so if a lot of young people struggle with substance abuse or self-harm, which is a very important issue that I believe is plaguing my generation. However, if social media companies fearing that there could be a potential for litigation or concerns, then they would overmoderate content, and that could remove any sort of content based around substance abuse or self-harm, including beneficial resources that could help connect those that are struggling with those things to communities or resources that can end up helping them get the support that they need. So we appreciate the efforts in making online safer for children, and we agree with that, but we do believe that this bill could lead to some unintended consequences that I just spoke about.
Okay. Hope, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you, likewise.